And so, esteemed colleagues, Professor Zilksthon adjusted his third eye stalk for dramatic effect. I present to you conclusive evidence that the so-called humans were nothing more than an elaborate hoax perpetrated by ancient civilization-building software gone rogue. The assembled crowd of Zalaxians in the Grand Academy's Mythological Studies amphitheater buzzed with appreciation, their bioluminescent crests glowing in various shades of agreement. The annual Galactic Myth-Busting Conference was always a highlight of the academic calendar, but this year's presentation was particularly entertaining. Consider, if you will, Zilksthon continued, his tentacles gesturing at the holographic display, the absurdity of their supposed characteristics. A bipedal species that allegedly conquered their world despite having no natural armor, no backup organs, and only 2 eyes. Preposterous. Laughter rippled through the audience. A young academic raised her sensory appendage, her scales shifting to the formal questioning purple. Yes, junior researcher Vexra, but professor, what about the artifacts? The transmissions from the Sol system? The ancient warning beacons? Zilksthon's skin rippled in what the Zalaxians considered a condescending smile. Ah, yes, the infamous keep out boys. Clearly automated defense systems left by the precursors to protect their mining operations. As for the transmissions? He pulled up another hologram, this one showing what appeared to be an ancient broadcast. These so-called television signals are clearly too primitive to be from a spacefaring race, and they all stopped centuries ago. Quite convenient, wouldn't you say? More appreciative buzzing from the crowd. Zilksthon from the crowd. Zilksthon was on a roll. In fact, my latest research suggests that humans were invented by the precursors as a cautionary tale. A story to warn developing civilizations about the dangers of He paused for effect. Inefficient evolution. The audience's bioluminescence peaked in amusement. Even the stuffy academic board members were glowing a pleased shade of chartreuse. Think about it logically, Zilksthon continued, really getting into his stride now. They supposedly required 8 hours of unconsciousness every planetary rotation. Their young needed years of care before becoming useful. They had no natural defenses except their... He consulted his notes with an exaggerated gesture. Opposable thumbs and problem-solving abilities. More laughter. A senior researcher in the front row was practically convulsing with mirth, their chromatophores cycling through every shade of amusement. And my personal favorite absurdity, they allegedly developed space travel while still using combustion engines. Imagine, a species so primitive they literally strapped themselves to controlled explosions to leave their planet. The crowd was eating it up. Zilksthon's fourth heart swelled with pride. This would certainly secure his position as head of the Department of Debunked Mythologies. Ooh. In conclusion, dear colleagues, I think we can finally put this charming but obviously fictional species to rest alongside other myths like faster-than-light travel without quantum tunneling, and the ridiculous notion of consuming solid food for sustenance. As the applause reached its peak, a junior communications officer burst into the amphitheater, their scales flashing emergency red. The security fields barely had time to recognize their clearance before they stumbled to a stop. Professor, everyone, the long-range sensors, they're... Calm yourself, young one, Zilksthon said, annoyed at the interruption of his triumph. What about the sensors? The officer's voice trembled. They're detecting a massive fleet entering the system, thousands of ships, and they're not using any known drive signatures. Impossible, Zilksthon scoffed. Our quantum detection grid would have picked any conventional approach vectors. Where are they supposedly coming from? The young officer's scales went pale. That's just it, Professor. They're coming from the direction of Sol, and they're hailing us. The amphitheater erupted in chaos as the main display screen activated automatically. The image that appeared caused several Zalaxians to faint outright. There on the screen stood a bipedal figure with only 2 eyes, no scales, and the most unsettling lack of tentacles anyone had ever seen. Greetings, people of Zalax, the figure said in perfectly translated Zalaxian standard. We apologize for our extended absence from galactic affairs. We hope you've enjoyed the peace and quiet, but humanity is back from its little historical sabbatical. We brought cookies. They're solid food. You're going to love them. Zilksthon's scales cycled through every known color of distress before settling on a sickly gray. In the back of his mind, he wondered if the Academy would let him change his thesis topic. The human on screen smiled, showing far too many teeth. Oh, and Professor Zilks then thought, "We particularly enjoyed your presentation. The part about the controlled explosions was spot on, actually. Though these days we prefer controlled quantum singularities. Much more efficient." The professor's third eye stalk drooped in mortification. Somewhere in the crowd, a student whispered, "Does this mean we have to update the textbooks again?" The next several hours in the Zalaxian Central Government Complex were what humans might have called a cosmic comedy of error. The High Council chamber, normally a model of dignified deliberation, had devolved into something resembling a panic circus with tentacles. "We must consult the first contact protocols," Supreme Counselor Vaxner declared, all 5 of their hearts beating erratically. "Oh, we already did," Second Administrator Kleeps replied, their scales flickering between anxiety purple and embarrassment orange. "They're filed under mythological encounters. See Philosophy Department. Someone filed them there 3 centuries ago as a joke." In the corner, Professor Zilksthon was attempting to disappear into his own chromatophores while frantically updating his academic thesis. The working title now read, "Humans, a surprisingly non-mythological analysis of why I should have checked my sources better." The emergency meeting was interrupted by another transmission from the human fleet. The same unsettlingly symmetric face appeared on screen, though this time the human was holding something round and brown. "Sorry to interrupt," the human said, taking a bite of the object, "but we couldn't help noticing you've been in emergency sessions for 6 hours. Just wanted to let you know we're still waiting. Also, this cookie is getting stale. Please hold." Vaxner said with as much dignity as they could muster, "We are following proper diplomatic procedures." "You mean the ones filed under mythological encounters?" the human asked, raising what appeared to be a patch of fur above one eye. "We have very good signals intelligence and a sense of humor." The council chamber erupted again. Junior diplomat Yexti fainted, their bioluminescent spot spelling out 40444, protocol not found in ancient Zalaxian, as they collapsed. "Perhaps," suggested Counselor Mizrax, their wisdom tentacles quivering, "we should admit we have no idea what we're doing and ask them what they want." The room fell silent. Such a radical suggestion, actually being honest, hadn't been tried in diplomatic relations for millennia. "We can't do that," Vaxner protested. "What about our reputation as a sophisticated spacefaring civilization?" "You mean the civilization that just spent 6 hours trying to find their own first contact protocols?" The human on screen interjected, "Sorry, still listening." "These quantum communications are really good at picking up everything. By the way, whoever just suggested being honest, promotion recommended." Mizrax's scales flushed with pride, then embarrassment, then settled on a confused swirl of both. Finally, Professor Zilkstein stepped forward, his academic dignity in tatters, but his scientific curiosity piqued. "Might I suggest we start with basic introductions? For instance, how did you manage to approach without our quantum detection grid noticing?" The human's face broke into what several Zalaxians would later describe as an terrifyingly enthusiastic dental display, a smile in human terms. "Oh, that's simple. We didn't approach through normal space. Remember those ancient warning buoys you mentioned? They're actually quantum tunnel network markers. We've been here the whole time, just sideways in reality. Your detection grid works perfectly for 3-dimensional space." "We just took a little detour through Dimension 17. Zilkstein's note-taking tentacle moved with desperate speed. "Humans casual about dimensional physics. Update threat assessment accordingly." "Now," the human continued, finishing their cookie, "about those introductions. We brought a cultural exchange package. It includes our complete history, scientific knowledge, and most importantly, our entertainment media. We particularly recommend starting with something called cat videos. They're excellent for diplomatic relations." The council stared in horror as several thousand zettabytes of data began downloading into their systems. The archive master's chromatophores displayed the Zalaxian equivalent of a blue screen of death. "Oh, and Professor Zilksthon," the human added, We'd love to have you aboard our flagship for a detailed discussion about human inefficiencies. Our captain is particularly interested in your theories about controlled explosions. She's what we call a rocket enthusiast. Zilksthos went pure white. So, in the academic world, there was nothing more terrifying than having to explain your theories to the subjects of said theories, especially when those subjects commanded an armada of ships that treated dimensional physics as a minor inconvenience. One last thing, the human said cheerfully, "Food. We noticed your species communicates partially through bioluminescence. You might want to inform the civilian population that spelling out we're all going to die in glowing letters visible from orbit is a bit premature. We can read that, by the way." Universal translators are very thorough these days. Professor Zilksthon had never felt more out of place in his entire academic career. Standing in the human flagship's conference room, his tentacles nervously coiled around his datapad, he faced what his ancestors would have considered impossible, a panel of very real, very amused human scientists. The room itself defied his expectations. He'd assumed humans being primitive would have stark utilitarian spaces. Instead, the conference room featured comfortable chairs quickly modified for Zalaxian physiology, potted plants, and most disturbingly something called a coffee machine that the humans treated with near religious reverence. "So, Professor," began Dr. Sarah Chen, the human fleet's chief scientific officer, "let's go through your paper point by point. I particularly enjoyed the section about our inefficient evolution." She took a sip from her coffee mug, which bore the text, "I'm not procrastinating, I'm waiting for my coffee to kick in." Zilksthon's scales shifted to embarrassment purple. "Perhaps we could skip that section." "Oh no," Dr. Chen grinned. "That's the best part." "Especially your theory about our lack of backup organs being a fatal evolutionary flaw. Would you like to know how many backup organs we actually have?" A human in a medical uniform raised her hand. "The liver can regenerate from just 25% of its original mass. The skin constantly regenerates. We have 2 kidneys when we only need 1. And don't get me started on the redundancies in our nervous system." But, Zilksthon's third eye stalk drooped. "Oh, your historical record showed you dying from simple infections. Surely that proves that we got better at medicine," another human suggested. "You should see what we can do with nanobots now. Though we still haven't cured the common cold, that little virus is surprisingly stubborn." Dr. Chen pulled up a holographic display of Zilksthon's presentation. "Now, about this part where you claimed our space travel was achieved through strapping ourselves to controlled explosions. Was that incorrect?" Zilksthon asked hopefully. "Oh no, that part was spot on," a propulsion engineer chimed in. "We absolutely did that. Still do sometimes for nostalgia, though now we mostly use quantum foam manipulation and dimensional folding. Speaking of which, your paper comparing FTL travel to fictional nonsense was hilarious. We've bookmarked it in our entertainment database." Zilksthon's scales were cycling through colors so rapidly he was starting to feel dizzy. Perhaps we could discuss your society instead? Surely you can't all be scientists and warriors as the myths suggested." The humans exchanged glances. "Well," Dr. Chen began, "we do have lots of other professions. Artists, teachers, politicians, though we try not to talk about those. And, of course, our most respected profession. Your greatest minds, your military leaders." Zilksthon asked eagerly, hoping to finally have guessed something correctly. "Close." Dr. Chen smiled. "Our meme creators. Your what? Oh, right, cultural context. Here, let me show you." She pulled up another holographic display. "This is what humans call a cat video compilation, followed by something we call dad jokes. These form the foundation of our interstellar communication network." For the next hour, Zilksthon watched in fascinated horror as humans explained how they had built a galactic civilization while simultaneously spending enormous resources on creating and sharing what they called quality content. "But this is entertainment," he asked, watching a video of something called a puppy failing to climb stairs. "Entertainment, cultural exchange, diplomatic tool. You'd be surprised how many interstellar conflicts we've resolved by sharing funny videos," Dr. Chen explained. "We once prevented a war by introducing an aggressive species to something called bubble wrap popping asmar." A young human scientist raised her hand. Should we show him TikTok? Let's not break him completely, Dr. Chen advised. He still hasn't processed the fact that we named our first faster-than-light ship Yeet into the void. Zilksthyn's note-taking tentacle had long since given up trying to maintain academic objectivity. His latest entries read more like existential questions. Humans use humor as weapon. Cultural victory through memes? Why do they keep saying poggers? Oh, and Professor, Dr. Chen added, we've taken the liberty of updating your academic database. You might want to check the new category we've added. Human studies, things we actually do that sound made up, but aren't. Just then, a human rushed into the conference room looking excited. Dr. Chen, the Zalaxian public has discovered our cat videos. Their entire social network is now nothing but their own pets attempting to knock things off high surfaces. Excellent, Dr. Chen nodded. Phase 1 of cultural integration is proceeding exactly as planned. Zilksthyn realized with growing horror that the humans hadn't just mastered space travel, they had weaponized what his species had always considered their greatest weakness, their bizarre sense of humor. The Zalaxian High Council's emergency session was interrupted by an unusual sound. Laughter. Not the traditional Zalaxian expression of amusement, a dignified fluctuation of bioluminescent patterns, but actual, human-style laughter. Supreme Counselor Vaxner's scale shifted to alarm crimson. What is the meaning of this? A junior communications officer, trying and failing to maintain their professional composure, activated the main display. Sir, you need to see this. The screen showed a viral video spreading across the Zalaxian information network. Someone had taken footage from Professor Zilksthyn's infamous Humans Are Myths presentation and edited it with what humans called meme formats. The professor's confident declaration about human inefficiency was now intercut with scenes of actual human achievements set to something called epic fail music. Is that what humans call a remix? Second Administrator Kleeps asked, their educational tentacle twitching with unwanted curiosity. It gets worse, the communications officer said. The humans released their entertainment archives to our public network. Our youth are now communicating in something they call Gen Z speak. As if on cue, a message flashed across the emergency broadcast system. OMG, Supreme Council literally can't even RN. No cap for free Vaxners. Chromatophores displayed the closest Zalaxian equivalent to a migraine. Can someone translate? According to our human cultural advisors, another officer said, it means our governing body is, quote, not vibing with the current situation. They assure us this is a compliment. Possibly. Meanwhile, in the joint human Zalaxian science division, Professor Zilksthyn was having his own crisis of identity. The humans had invited him to collaborate on a project, claiming his unique perspective on human impossibilities would be valuable. You want me to what? He asked. All three eye stalks focused on Dr. Chen in disbelief. Help us break physics, she replied cheerfully. Your paper about how humans couldn't possibly navigate through quantum foam gave us some fascinating ideas. Turns out if you approach the problem with the absolute certainty that it's impossible, you find some interesting loopholes. But that's not how science works. Zilksthyn protested. That's exactly how human science works. Another scientist chimed in. Half our breakthroughs came from someone saying, that's impossible, and someone else saying, hold my beer. What's a beer? Oh, you're going to love this, Dr. Chen grinned. It's another thing you listed as implausible humans deliberately consuming mild poison for enjoyment. Before Zilksthyn could process this new horror, his datapad pinged. The Zalaxian Scientific Academy had just published their first human influence paper. Yeet or not to yeet, a quantum mechanical analysis of human transportation methods. In the civilian sectors, the cultural exchange was reaching new heights of chaos. Zalaxian pets, traditionally dignified companions, were now being recorded attempting human-inspired activities. The trending video was of a Zalaxian flutterbeast, a traditionally majestic creature playing with something humans called a cardboard box. The Human Cultural Integration Office, hastily established after someone discovered human dance videos, was overwhelmed with questions. Why do humans say big mood when discussing emotional states? Is it true they invented space travel because someone said it was impossible? What is a vibe check and why do we need to pass it? The humans, for their part, were delighting in the exchange. They had already created a new category of videos, Zelaxians reacting to human things. The most popular was Zelaxian scientists watch human history documentaries. You won't believe their reactions to the space race. Back in the council chamber, Vaxner was trying to maintain order while their own scales betrayed them by displaying amused turquoise. We must maintain our cultural dignity, they declared, just as their personal communication device played something called Never Gonna Give You Up. Who did this? They demanded. The humans call it getting Rick-rolled Supreme Counselor, an aide explained. They assure us it's a great honor in their cult. Professor Zilston, watching the chaos unfold, made one final note in his revised hypothesis. Humans didn't need an armada to conquer the galaxy. They just needed their memes. One standard galactic month after first contact, the Zelaxian Central Archives received its most unusual submission yet, a joint human-Zelaxian documentary titled When Myths Become Memes, a comprehensive guide to being wrong about everything. The lead author, Professor Zilksthon Thon. And that's how I became the galaxy's first Zelaxian YouTuber, Zilksthon explained to a packed audience at the Galactic Cultural Exchange Summit. His scales, once rigidly maintained in academic proper colors, now freely displayed an array of what humans called mood lighting. My latest video, Top 10 Things I Got Wrong About Humans, number 6 will shock you, has reached over 12 billion views across 3 spiral arms of the galaxy. He continued, his third eye stalk sporting what appeared to be a tiny human baseball cap worn sideways. The human delegation sitting in the front row gave him a thumbs up, a gesture that had already been adopted by 17 different species, despite most of them lacking thumbs. In the months since first contact, Zelaxian society had undergone what historians would later call the Great Vibe Shift. The changes were both subtle and profound. The Zelaxian High Council had officially adopted Casual Friday, though there was still heated debate about whether memes could be included in formal diplomatic communications. The fact that this debate was happening in a channel called #Council Shitposting was largely ignored. The Science Academy had been revolutionized. The humans' approach of doing it wrong faster until you accidentally do it right had led to several breakthrough discoveries, including a new form of faster-than-light travel based on what humans called yeet physics. The key, Dr. Chen explained in a joint presentation, was combining Zelaxian precise mathematical models with the human tradition of asking what if we tried it anyway. The result is a drive system that technically shouldn't work, but does, and we're all agreeing not to question it too deeply. Even the traditionally stoic Zelaxian military command had been affected. They had recently commissioned their first human-inspired spacecraft design, the XSS Hold My Beverage. But perhaps the most significant change was in education. Professor Zilksthon's new course, Human Studies, yes, they actually did that, had become the most popular elective in the Academy's history. Today's lecture was titled From One Small Step to One Giant Yeet, Understanding Human Space Exploration. The key to understanding humans, Zilksthon told his students, is accepting that they don't just defy expectations, they actively enjoy doing so. They turn their greatest weaknesses into strengths, their mistakes into opportunities, and their absurdity into an art form. A student raised their sensory appendage. Professor, is it true that humans invented an entire form of mathematics just to prove something was impossible? Then used that same mathematics to do it anyway? You're referring to the famous hold my beer theorem of quantum tunneling, Zilksthon replied. That's actually next week's lesson, along with why humans named their first AI system definitely not Skynet. In the orbital stations above Zalax, human and Zelaxian engineers worked side by side, their different approaches creating something entirely new. The humans brought their chaos, their why not attitude, and their inexplicable ability to make things work by sheer stubborn determination. The Zelaxians brought their precision, their careful calculations, and their gradually developing appreciation for what they now called human core aesthetic. As for Professor Zilksthon's office at the Academy had undergone its own transformation. The walls, once covered in serious academic papers, now displayed a collection of what humans called motivational posters. His favorite showed an image of Earth's first rocket launches with the caption, "Sometimes the best way to prove something is impossible is to do it anyway." His latest research paper, The Anthropological Significance of That's What She Said, Human Humor as a Driving Force in Intergalactic Relations, had been accepted for publication in both the Zalaxian Scientific Journal and something humans called Reddit's RHFY. The paper ended with a conclusion that would have been unthinkable just months ago. In retrospect, perhaps the most mythical thing about humans was our belief that they were myths. Though I maintain that their habit of keeping creatures called cats in their homes and warships still requires further study. As the first year of human-Zalaxian relations drew to a close, the Supreme Council received a formal communication from Earth. It contained only one line in what humans called Comic Sans font. "Who's mythical now, fam?" Smiling face with sunglasses, the Council's official response, drafted by their newly appointed Minister of Vibe Checks, was equally succinct. "No cap via far for 100 points."